Welcome to Absolutely Not, the live podcast series dedicated to providing examples of setting personal boundaries at work and the vocabulary needed to name harm in those spaces. Thank y'all so much for being here today. I am so grateful to everyone who keeps showing up and being a part of this community. Your presence is helping this space grow. So thank you so much. The key words for this episode are professional, discrimination, and racism. I encourage you to look up these definitions of these words and compare them to the definitions that you carry with you on a daily basis. If you need help comparing, please let me know. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp allows you to connect with 24,000 licensed therapists in a safe and private online environment. You pay a low flat fee for unlimited therapy with a therapist. Visit www.betterhelp.com/absolutelynot for more information and to get 10% off your first month. This episode is titled Redefining Professionalism. And I know it. Shouldn't we be doing that? And that message is brought to you by my amazing special guest today, Pabel Martinez, he, him. Pabel's superpower is uncovering the story behind the numbers, translating data to stories. He's been able to flex the skill at various technology companies such as Facebook and TikTok. Although he's been successful, he has met challenges along the way. His mission in life became redefining professionalism by empowering authenticity. In 2020, he launched Plurawl to bring this mission to life. He is a native New Yorker, Afro-Latino, and Dominican. Thank you so much for being here today.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm really excited.
I'm super excited. And I know y'all heard the title. I mean, I love that that's your whole mission. That's like your whole vibe. What really solidified that vibe for you?
I mean, I feel like I've been hearing about professionalism even as a young kid. You know, my grandfather growing up used to tell me, yo, do you see presidents with beards? Do you see them with tattoos? What about CEOs? Like do-rags and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, damn, nah, not really, right? So I tried to mirror my appearance accordingly. But what I realized later in life was that indirectly, he was also telling me that in order to be successful, I had to be more white, right? Because the media and the views that he was telling me to be more like were like that. So, it wasn't until later when I looked up the definition. Speaking of definitions, when you look up the word professionalism, is defined as a skill or competence for a profession. So if you're not talking about skill or competence, then we're being biased in our evaluation of someone's professionalism. And I could talk about my whole experience in corporate, but like that's kind of like the foundation.
And I resonate. Like, haven't we all been through that foundation? But I appreciate you breaking down the definition of professionalism, because just like we said in the intro, people are carrying around different definitions of professionalism with them every single day into offices and spaces. When was the last time you had to remind somebody of the definition of professionalism?
Oh, I do it every day, and it's so much fun because I think the most challenging part for people is to acknowledge that they have bias. I believe, and people may disagree with me, but I believe everyone has bias on some form, right? The important part is to recognize it before taking an action. I'll give you an example. Like, I love coffee shops. If I go to a cafe, I need my barista to look damn near homeless. If they don't, I'm gonna be like, damn, is this really gonna be a good cup of coffee? You know what I mean? But like, that's my bias, right? But I walked into cafes and a dude looks like an investment banker. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna give him a chance. I'm not gonna walk away from that cafe. I'm gonna give him a chance. I'm gonna try the coffee, etc. Right? But I think so often we don't give people a chance just based on like how they look. Mm-hmm. So my latest example is what I did. It was I remember there was this picture on LinkedIn that was circulating of this lawyer with like tattoos on her arm. She looked to be a white woman. I'm not sure where she was from, but there was a lot of support on there. But I remember this one comment that was like, yeah, that's cool, but like as long as they don't look like rappers. I was like, what? So what I did was I took a picture of Quavo and he has tattoos on his face, and I was like, is this picture unprofessional? Everybody said yes. So it was like, all right, well, like, are tattoos on your face more professional than tattoos on your arm? Like, who gets to make up these rules? And I'll tell you who it is. It's our bias. Our bias creates these rules in our head of what professionalism is. Because if you look at the definition, it has nothing to do with looks.
Oh, okay. I got it. And what you said right then was in our head. So many people are carrying these definitions and they never really written them down. Like if you wrote that down word for word, oh no, it's because of their black skin and because the tattoos are on their face. Do you know how racist that sounds? On a piece of paper. There are people in the world who are putting these biases into paper and policy. Have you ever seen these biases put into policies and paper?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's interesting because I think when people say authenticity is another word that everyone has their own definition for, right? And when I started the podcast, which we couldn't get into, I expected people when describing their authenticity to name a lot of things visually, right? Mm-hmm. So there are policies in place like New York just passed the Crown Act not too long ago, right? Which like it makes it illegal to discriminate based on hairstyles, right? But like right now, the Yankees, I don't know how many people are familiar with the Yankees, but they still have a facial hair policy that they implement. So like right now, the Yankees are not allowed to grow any facial hair. They're not allowed to grow dreads, afros, braids. In fact, there are players that have been traded and acquired by the Yankees that have been forced to shave off their dreads. So although the Crown Act is legal, the Crown Act passed in New York, there's still some of these policies that employers are still forcing people to do. And I think it even goes beyond the aesthetics and the visuals because it wasn't up till last year, 2 years ago, that it was not illegal to discriminate based on sexual orientation. So like there are a bunch of policies in place that suppress authenticity when it comes to professionalism.
And I know there are going to be people who hear what you talked about for the Yankees, like, well, they're athletes. Like that's their job. That is their place of work. And they are unable to bring their natural hairstyles into their place of work. What would you say to those people who are like, but they're athletes?
Well, I think when you think about athletes, they're probably some of the most influential people in our society. Right. So when you look at an athlete and you see them giving up a part of themselves to be part of a team and really to get a check, you think to yourself, damn, well, if they do it, that means I got to do it when I go into corporate. Right. Like the Yankees aren't that far off from finance firms. Financial firms still force employees to shave. So I think athletes is just an example. And when we look at how impactful the media is, I think it's a very powerful example.
Just an example. And these examples are what people bring up in conversations. Like those organizations, who is that? I can't even, what is it? The Major Baseball, is it? What is it? I'm sorry.
Major League Baseball.
Okay, Major League MLB. Like that organization, that's where people are getting examples from because it's a large organization. The NFL, that's where people are getting examples from. Where else can they be getting examples from? Like if that's all they're getting examples from, is there anywhere else they should be getting examples from?
I mean, yeah, I think it's up to us in the platforms that we're creating to really represent those examples. I remember when I launched my brand, I wanted to challenge some of those stereotypes through art. And what I did was my first design ever that we published was of the Yankees, some iconic Yankee players. And what I did was I put beards on them. And I tried to reimagine what they would look like if they were allowed to be their most authentic self. And like, I don't know if they want to grow a beard, right? But it's more so around like playing with some of those ideals, right? The AOC drawing behind me, her with hoop earrings and braids in many industries are considered unprofessional, right? The Yankees, again, going back to that example, they weren't allowed to do that. I went to all boys Catholic high school in the South Bronx. I wasn't allowed to have braids. Not that I had my hair long enough. There were plenty of people that did. Right. So I'm trying to reimagine, like, can a congresswoman have braids and hoop earrings and red lipstick and all these sort of things? So there are different ideas that I'm trying to play around with. But I realized that people would be like, oh, but they're celebrities. Oh, but they're even AOC is a celebrity. Right. So what I try to do and create that representation was launch my podcast where I try to explore that conflict that we often face between professionalism and authenticity with each guest.
And I can't thank you enough for creating that platform for people to get examples for it. I think the more people who are discriminated against in their workplaces create platforms to have these conversations, that's where people can find their damn examples. Stop saying that you can't find examples because we out here talking about it. But some of the
Yeah.
words that you've used frequently through this conversation is authentic and vulnerability. Those are two words that are like big buzz right now, big buzz. But like you said, they have different definitions. And sometimes people will say, oh no, it's this, but not that. Like you can do this, but don't talk like that. Don't have your hair like that. Don't dress like that. Don't all of the things. What do you say to people when they say that?
When they don't feel comfortable being their authentic self?
Or when people are asking them to cut pieces out of their authentic selves?
Yeah, it's a really difficult question. And it kind of goes back to like why I launched the podcast. I see two sides of it. Like I see on one side people that look like me, for them to get the representation that they wish they had when they were younger, right? For them to feel inspired to be themselves, right? But on the other side, there's a whole group of people that don't look like me, that this podcast, every episode is an educational opportunity for them. I have had old colleagues who are white men reach out and they were like, damn, I'm sorry for saying that you were well spoken. I didn't know that that was offensive. And there are like so many examples of this where, you know, people have made suggestions to other colleagues and said like, "Ooh, can you do this hairstyle when you walk into that meeting?" And they didn't realize how offensive or triggering or all of these buzzwords are. So in many ways, these stories are representation, but also educational opportunities for people as well.
And I think so often how there's another form of discrimination, like the level of education that is needed to be at a certain level in an organization. The education that we are providing here is provided nowhere else. You feel me? Like it's like, where else are you going to be educated on these type of conversations? I've never been to an institution that's having these conversations. Have you been met with those types of biases and discrimination on what education is?
Oh, I mean, somebody had this quote on the podcast, but it was like, yo, no one teaches you how to deal with microaggressions. It's not like you got, it's not like you got a class. Like I've had classes on like resume build. I remember like in college when I was trying to get an internship, right? I had a bunch of classes on like how to interview, how to do this and that. And I feel like all the education we get is to get in the door, but no one tells you what to do once you get in the door. You know what I mean? Like, how do you stay there? How do you not get kicked out? How do you deal with like all these awkward situations? So, but yeah, it's so interesting too, because I remember I was talking with a friend of mine when we were both working at Facebook, and I was like, we looked around and we were like, yo, all the Black employees went to top-notch schools. Top notch. I'm talking about everybody went to Ivy League school. And like, if you compare it to like a lot of the white coworkers, and there's nothing wrong with like not an Ivy League school. I didn't go to Ivy League school, but I'm just saying the qualifications that I think Black employees, and I'm looping in Hispanic employees within that as well, had to get compared to some white counterparts, like huge disparities. It's kind of like we have to go above and beyond to even get in the door as well.
Oh no, it's not kind of like it is. It is what it is. And you talked about how we are not taught at any point how to deal with microaggressions or how to deal with the unsafe environments that we are going into as the people that we are, just because we are in the bodies that we are in and the cultures that we're bringing. And it brought to my mind that that's the expectation. The expectation is that we're going to assimilate. Has anyone ever kind of voiced that expectation to you?
I remember I had a breakdown at Facebook, and it was the first time I've ever cried about a job. And I just hit this level of exhaustion from code switching. And I was speaking to my aunt about it. I was like crying on her shoulder, essentially. She was like, why do you code switch? Why do you go so in depth with the research that you do on the weekends? Like literally dedicating hours on the weekends. Because people think when you hear code switching, it's like, oh, I'm gonna instead of saying dead ass, I'm gonna be like, oh, that's true. No, it's so much more complicated. Like I would literally dedicate days out of my week to study white popular American culture instead of doing what I wanted to do, instead of doing work, so that when I went into work and people ask me what I did this weekend, I can say something relatable, because how you move up in corporate America is through relationships, right? So I just hit this point where in my career where I just got exhausted, and she was like, why are you doing this? And I was like, I had no answer. I was like, I just thought that's what you had to do to move up, right? Because going back to my grandfather, that's what we're taught at an early age, whether it's through media, whether it's through our family, it's like fit in. And those have some real implications for our grandfathers, because at that time they were like literally kicking people out the country for no reason, right? For us, I think we have the opportunity now where things are not necessarily always safe, but they're safer than they were previous generations, where I don't think we have to assimilate as much as we think.
And it's in the acceptance of that and the realization of our privilege, like in our generations, like what our ancestors had to go through in order for us to have this privilege, and for us not to take opportunity of that, for us to assimilate nonetheless, like that's not bringing honor to what they had to go. You know what I mean? Like they went, oh, okay, let me get past that. They went through so much, it would not be honoring them by code switching or by assimilating. I bring my heritage, I bring my culture into places that I go to because of what they had to go through. Ooh, I'm past it. I love that you keep talking about that it's in our head. It is in our head. Let me tell y'all something, but you said it's in the media. It's in everything that we see. Y'all are just not writing it down. History has been washed over to kind of not have it written down. When was the last time you had to kind of say that to somebody? Like, hey, that's not true. It's not in my head. I see it in plain sight.
Yeah, no, that's real. I mean, I think the interesting part, right? Like we've been talking a lot about what's in our heads, but these examples and these representations, these definitions are in our coworkers' heads as well, right? So when we walk into work, they also have the same idea around like what a professional is supposed to look like, right? So, and maybe they have stronger beliefs on that. Maybe I'm finally getting over it, but maybe they are. Maybe they haven't started that journey around bias and acceptance, all that kind of stuff as well. It's so interesting too, because even thinking about education and going back to that, right now, most corporations have bias training, right? And I almost think about like diversity and inclusion and equity training and education. I feel like all of it is geared towards white people. And I kind of have a problem with that. Yes, I think that they should be taught, educated, all those things, but like where's the diversity and inclusion training for us? Like when is someone going to teach me how to deal with these awkward situations? When is someone going to teach me how to communicate my emotions so that instead of being labeled aggressive, I can have a productive conversation around, hey y'all, I feel unheard because y'all don't listen to me, right? Like I think that needs to be a conversation as well.
I cannot thank you enough. I cannot thank you enough for breaking that down, because, and I seen a post about that on LinkedIn the other day. It was just like, where is my DEI training? Because this is for Becky and Chad and them. Like this is for them. I cannot relate to this. I already know that I am discriminated against. How do I move past that? I already know that, Becky. I need to move past it so I can have effective conversations with y'all and not want to want to work here. I think that really stems from like emotional intelligence and boundaries, and knowing that these labels that are pressed upon us, aggressive, disruptive, all of the shit from like when we were children, is just not true. We have to like erase all of that. What are some of the boundaries you're setting around that definition of professionalism that you're redefining every day?
Oof, boundaries is such a, I mean, we're throwing a lot of buzzwords, but these are powerful words. I mean, boundaries, I think just being comfortable and saying no. But I think being like, I've become really comfortable. All right, take a step back. Like we've said, like words are very powerful, right? And I'm getting like chills even thinking about it, because I've been in certain rooms where I go beyond saying no. Like someone says something and I say, I don't love how you said that. Can I like, I want to be careful with the narrative that you're associating with my name. Right. So I'm very intentional these days of not just saying no, but making sure that I'm writing my own narrative instead of someone else doing it for me. And here's a very simple example, right? Someone said, oh, Pabel, the project you led didn't do well. And I said, hold up. How about there's more context to that? How about the team's project didn't do well because of X, Y, and Z. You know what I mean? And there's a difference in like someone putting all of that ownership and dependence and expectations on you where it isn't really necessary. But the best thing that has ever happened to me, and it's my only regret in life, is not going to therapy sooner. Therapy has been instrumental to not only my personal life, but to my career. So that's something that's been really helpful as well.
I cannot thank you enough for sharing that as well, because there are a lot of communities out here, my communities, that are so afraid to move forward into the mental health space with good reason. I won't get it. This is not a history lesson, but with very good reason. Was there a turning point in your career or in your life that you were like, I have to go to therapy?
I mean, I was really fortunate working at Facebook, right? I have a level of privilege working at Facebook, and I have a level of privilege of working for a lot of these tech companies. They pay for it. So I got like 50 sessions free for the year. That's a level of access that a lot of people don't have, right? So it was that, but it was the representation for me that really gave me the permission to go. My friend was going through a divorce at the time, and I was like, yo, how are you dealing with it? He's like, I'm going to therapy. I'm like, huh? Where you get that at Amazon? Like, with therapy. And I was like, all right, I'm gonna try it. But it's been helpful in so many different scenarios. And one of them in particular was when I got labeled aggressive. I had a really dope conversation with my therapist about it. She asked me a simple question. She was like, yo, were you being aggressive? And I was like, you know what? I probably was. And she was like, that's okay. You know, they say that people that use a louder tone are often using the voice of the unheard. Have you ever felt unheard by your teammates? And I was like, oh my God, all the time. You know how many times I say something, no one listens? This white dude says the same thing with less data back it up. He gets credit for it. And they'd be like, oh, Pabel, take notes. That was a good idea. I'm like, all right. She was like, well, maybe that was the last resort for you. Maybe you felt the need to raise your voice because no one was listening. Imagine if I knew how to communicate my emotions before that happened. And I was like, hey, in a meeting, I feel unheard. No one's listening to me. I could have avoided certain situations.
Once again, there are so many words that people from certain communities have internalized and kind of put a negative, because they have been negative and like made negative towards us if they're attached to us. Angry Black woman, aggressive, all of the things. But it is important to understand where our emotions are coming from. Like, did they mean aggressive in that way? I don't know. I have no idea. Should we talk this shit out? Definitely so. We need to have a conversation, because either way, I am mad as fuck. Like, I'm mad at how that was handled, and somebody needs to talk to me about it. But I cannot thank your therapist enough, and you for sharing that gem with us in this space. There are so many things that we have covered just in this short amount of time. I can't thank you enough. Like, I really can't. One of the things that I want to take with me for the rest of my life is writing my own narrative. How are you writing your own narrative, like daily, like in conversations at work?
I think to write your own narrative, you really just got to get rid of fear, and it's something that like is not easy. I'll give you an example. Like, my most viral post on LinkedIn was this post on salary transparency. It's another social norm that I just don't understand in corporate, like the secrecy around salary transparency. The only reason that companies want us to be secret, the only reason companies want this to be secret is because we're obviously being paid different amounts, right? If we were getting paid the same amount, it wouldn't be a secret. Everybody would just know. And I'm not saying the CMO needs to get paid the same as the marketing assistant, but like all marketing assistants should relatively get paid the same amount, right? So I want my narrative and me to be known as like fearless, right? I want to be known for more than just selling ads and creating marketing. Like, I want to have an impact on my community, right? When I posted that, people were literally telling me like, yo, you're about to get fired. Like, yo, you shouldn't do that. Like, and I was like, honestly, if I were to get fired, like, I really don't care. Like, I could find another job. But if no one's going to talk about it, like, somebody needs to in order to change it. You know what I mean? So those are the type of things. Is like, I no longer have a fear of being fired. Like, I no longer have a fear of depending on like someone silencing me because of a paycheck. You know what I mean? I feel like I'll just figure it out at this point.
Mm. And they hate that, don't it? Like I say they as like a big word. Like people in power hate that when you are not fearful of the abuse that they hold over you or the paycheck or they hate that. One of the things that really came to mind is throughout this conversation, we have talked about questioning processes that are already in place. Why is your dress code look like that? Like, why does it say I can't have a beard? Why can't we share salaries? So for anybody in the audience who is listening to this, I'm sure they're probably thinking, damn, I'm gonna start asking some questions tomorrow. For the people in the audience who are fearful though, who still have that fear in them about asking these questions tomorrow at work, what are the top 3 tips you would share with them about being fearless?
Yo, this is a tough one too, because I don't want people to,
You're like,
I don't
damn, I'm
want,
about to.
I don't want people to leave this conversation and just like, just, risk it all, doing whatever they got to do. Like, make sure you understand the laws that are in place, like all these protections. For example, like when I shared my salary, someone asked me, like, yo, like, how'd you get through it? Like, did you read the your terms of service with the job, your offer letter? I was like, nah, I didn't read the offer letter, but I'll tell you what trumps the offer letter. Like, Obama passed a law that protects workers from having these conversations, et cetera. Right? So like, do a little bit of research. Don't just like be posting stuff. But I also like, there's so many different topics that you could be passionate about. I encourage you to think about one of them and really just do your research and be curious, because you'll find so many things that you're just like, wait, why is it like that? That makes no sense. You know what I mean? So I would say, like, do your research, but also just be curious about a particular topic and then find out what you fear. Like, is that fear realistic? Or is it just a story that you're telling yourself?
I am about to cry just because once again, our ancestors, like the preventative measures that they taught us, or like the safety precautions that like make sure you code switch, make sure you like, that fear is generational, like you pass down that fear to me. I am afraid when I see certain people. I am afraid to be myself in certain areas. And just accepting the fact that it's not at that level anymore. You feel me? Like that's not something that is I have to be hyper vigilant about all the time, nor is it important for me to do so. Like there are way more important things than me appeasing to some white man in some room. So thank you so much for breaking that down. Before we go today, is there anything else you want to share with everybody? And how can people find you? I mean, they know, but yeah.
Yeah, no, you can find me on LinkedIn at Pabel Martinez, and then Instagram, TikTok. You can find me at Plurawl, which is the name of the company. I'll say this, like Catalina Peña, who was a guest on the podcast, she's probably like number 2 episode. She had this quote that has always stuck with me. She was like, when you become your most authentic self, what you end up doing is you become a mirror for other people. So people will see themselves reflected back at them. And it's not going to be the entire mirror. It may be a piece of it, though. It may be a shard. It may be a glass. You know what I mean? It may be the way you speak. It may be the way you do your hair, right? People think you got to launch a nonprofit. People think you got to launch a business to make a positive impact on people. Literally, just by you being your most authentic self, someone is going to get the permission that they've always been looking for. You are going to be the representation that we need. The only way that we will redefine professionalism is if we all together go to work as our most authentic self. Then our employers, our hiring managers, they'll have no choice but to adjust because we're all doing it. Whether they're going to fire all of us? No, they're not going to do that. So just by you being yourself, like literally, you can change the world.
Mm-hmm. And there are so many people in power who want us to believe that we're minorities. Like we are less than we are, like there's so much more of us than them. I keep saying them, but y'all know who them is. One of the things that I learned throughout my discussions with some of my guests is flip your local table. Like I know so many people are talking about flipping tables, like in corporate space and stuff. Flip your regular ass table. Like today I'm going to take a nap. Today I'm going to not code switch during this meeting. Today I'm going to wear a do-rag during during this next meeting. Flip your regular ass table at your house and then see where that gets you. If it leads to like a state table, a countrywide table, that'd be great. But just flip your regular ass table. Thank you so much for sharing everything that you've shared today. I cannot thank you enough. For everybody who showed up today, thank you so much. And all the comments, so many people had so many positive things to say about your conversation because it was good. It was good. I'm so glad this is recorded. But to anybody who's listening to this, thank you so much and keep setting those boundaries. We'll see you next time on Absolutely Not. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to Absolutely Not. Your support means the world to me. You can always further support the show by leaving a review or visiting the Support the Mission page on my website, www.katrinastroll.com. My website is also where you can register for upcoming live episodes, watch amazing past episodes of Absolutely Not, and buy Absolutely Not merch. Yay! Until next time, keep setting those boundaries and saying absolutely not to anything unaligned. See you next time.